Hey, thanks for joining us today on our Wednesday live broadcast. Last week, we did a demonstration on how to remove orange peel via hand sanding wet. And we were using the Harbor Freight sanding sheets for that. So I went over some tips for how to cut the sheets, how to wrap the sheets, how to move your hand in a tight pattern. And we knocked down the orange peel just right out here. Today, I'm going to show you how to use the Harbor Freight system to remove orange peel out of black paint on this portion of the hood here. And but before we started, I made a little promo video and I sanded this section up here to test out this Harbor Freight system. Let's just see if you can, I'm not sure how dark that is. Does that show up at all, Craig? Yes. Okay, so kind of out in here, you can see it's sanded pretty flat. There's still quite a bit of orange peel, but I only ran that sander or that polisher for like 30 seconds just to test it out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll do the demonstration here. I'm going to pull my sanding marks out with a wool pad on a rotary. Then I'm going to polish out a hologram free using a foam pad on an orbital, and we'll show you the results. Then we'll do questions and answers. So basically what this is this is a 1981 Corvette 4-speed car. And the gentleman that owns this had a custom paint job put on it. And I'm sad to say that there's quite a bit of orange peel. There's what's called DIP, or dirt in paint. That's when the paint's so wet, little pieces of dirt in the air land in it and get stuck in it. So you got dirt stuck in the paint. There's also fish eyes, which is usually a sign of body shop contamination or airline contamination. And what happens is you get some kind of, a lot of times people talk about silicone, but it could actually be anything that causes water to bead up, causes surface tension, and that's what causes a fisheye, surface tension, some kind of contaminant on the finish as they paint it. And then what happens is the paint doesn't want to stick there, so it piles away from it, and it creates what they call a fisheye. It's kind of bubbled up. So this has a lot of defects, but here's the good news. This is going to be here for my 3-day class coming up May 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And on Saturday, we cover sanding and buffing. And I've got 3 cars for that class. I got this Corvette. I got a 1931 Model A street rod that went into the paint booth today. So that's fresh paint. It'll be here next week. It's fresh paint. And I have a 1941 Graham Hollywood, and I'm going to teach the Trizac damp sanding system on that. So this is going to get dry sanded by machine. The Model A is going to get dry sanded by hand, and the 41 Graham Hollywood is going to get machine sanded with Trizac. So there's 3 different ways to sand a car in one day at our 3-day class coming up, not this weekend, but the next weekend. Anyway, so here we go. We've got the Harbor Freight. Let me just kind of show you what they've launched here recently. They have their own interface pad. And the thing about this interface pad is it has all these vacuum holes on it. So if you want to use this with the vacuum sanding machine, a sander with a vacuum attachment, the theory is you will pull the dust that you're sanding through the sandpaper, through the interface pad, through the backing plate, and then it'll go into a canister somewhere. The problem with that idea with their system is there's no holes in their sanding disc. And there's also no holes. Well, I'm just using the Harbor Freight. Well, they call it a 6-inch sander, but it's a copy of the Porter cable. It's an 8mm free spinning random orbital polisher. But the factory backing plate on this doesn't have any holes either. So the whole sanding system, the whole vacuum system, they're not really up to speed, ready to launch that yet. So, but anyway, and then these start at fairly low grit. So 1,000 grit, this is what they call a film disc. 3M makes this. Eagle Abrasives is just a thin film of a sanding disc. And this has kind of a unique feeling surface texture. It feels almost like a piece of smooth plastic or paper. You don't feel any grit to it at all. So I tested this sanding some plexiglass this week, and it didn't work at all. But when I tested it here on this black paint, it does work on paint. So maybe it's just something to do with the plastic. Anyway, the thing I would point out, and I guess I can demonstrate this is an interface pad from Eagle Abrasives. As most of you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the Eagle dry sanding system. One of the systems I teach in our car classes and our boat classes. And their interface pad, they have both the interface with holes and the flat surface. But I'll guarantee you this interface pad here will work better with the Harbor Freight film discs than this one with the hole. And when I did some sanding, kind of what I noticed, and I'll go ahead and hook this up and show you. But wherever the holes are, you're getting less sanding action. So the whole system is, it's close, but it's not quite there. Maybe I've noticed Harbor Freight's been watching my stuff, so maybe they'll watch this, and if they want, they can contact me and I'll give them my own feedback. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead. This is the section we're going to sand. So what we have is we've got this positioned because Yancey's not here with his mobile camera. I've positioned the core so you can see the overhead light reflecting out of the paint here to show before. And this is going to be before down here also, but I got to roll the car backward to put the light on there so then you can see the before and after. So this is actually the area that I'm going to sand. So here's a tip for these things. You know, usually when you're machine sanding, you're going to be using a pneumatic sander or an electric sander, sometimes a cordless sander. I have a cordless Flex DA sander here. But what you want to do is you want to usually start out with a low speed setting. So I'm going to put this down on I'll put it down on the 2. I'm going to turn this thing on, and before I start actually trying to sand down a car, what I want to see is I want to see light sanding disc rotation, okay? I don't need this thing rotating because that becomes grinding, not sanding. But you want to see a little bit of rotation if at all possible. So I'll just turn this thing on, okay? And I've actually got pretty good rotation. I'm going to bump this thing up. There's the 3 setting. And when I push on this just a little bit, it kind of bogs down, but not too bad. But there's basically 4 passes. And let me just show you. You can zoom in on this, Craig. But see how you see these dots here, these whiter spots? That's every place there's a hole in this interface pad. See, it lines up. And to me, that's just not optimum for sanding. I think what would work better, and I'll go ahead and test this live. So I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to put the Eagle Abrasives interface pad on. I always align these so they're centered perfectly. And I'll go ahead and pull this disc off, the Harbor Freight interface pad. And then I'm going to take, and again, you got to center these up and get them perfect. You don't want any part of the Velcro touching the paint. Then I'm going to take a microfiber towel. And this is how you clean these. So as you sand, obviously I'm abrading the paint, so that's what that white dust is. You want to wipe that off. If you clean that off, but don't clean this off, you're going to load up the disc. If you clean this off, but don't clean that off as you're sanding, you're going to load up the disc. So you always want to be cleaning often, and you can do it as simple as just taking a microfiber towel and dragging this across the front, or what I like to do is just kind of flip the throttle, run the towel over it, and that cleans off the majority of all the abraded paint. Now, when I look at this, can you go ahead and zoom in, Craig? So there's some curves taking place here. That's where this channel is here. So in order to flatten this down, I either got to put a secondary interface pad or push a little harder. And you can also see the dirt in paint, these dark spots. And what that is that's actually a divot. So there's right in the middle of this dark spot. It's lower there. So that's a fisheye. This is a dirt speck. So we got both fisheyes, dirt specks, and orange peel. But anyway, so let me go ahead and I'm going to sand this again using the Eagle Abrasives interface pad. And I'm going to turn my speed up to about the 4. And I'm pushing a little bit. I'd say about 5 pounds, not too much. And normally when you're machine sanding like this, just like polishing paint, if you're working on a fairly large panel, you want to try to do a crosshatch pattern. And there's a reason for that. The reason is called UMR, Uniform Material Removal. And what that means is you want to remove the same amount of paint here as you remove here, as you remove here, as you remove here. You know, uniform. You want to have a uniform material removal, and then when you get through with the whole buffing process, you have a uniform appearance. That's why you do that. So anyway, so to me, that looks pretty good for demonstration points. This has 3 coats of clear. We could probably sand these out a little bit more. I'll sand them out just a little bit more, and then we'll go to the buffing step. So I clean my sanding disc off. I clean the paint off. I'll turn this thing back on. Okay, we'll check this out. Okay, that's as far as I would go. I wouldn't try to take out every single little defect on a paint job like this. It's just not a high-end paint job. And also, anytime you're doing any kind of sanding for a client, You also have to take into consideration not just the paint, but the expectations of the client. Now, if the client says, Mike, I want this thing perfect, then I would say, okay, if I go through the clear at any point, I want to be relieved of any responsibility for that. That's all on you. You can get the car repainted or get the panel repainted. And if they say, yeah, do it, because I want this thing perfect, then I would sand even further. But the expectation from the owner on this is to get it good, not get it great. So that is good. Okay, so now I've already done some testing, and I can actually pull this out with the Dr. Beasley's NSP 150 and a wool pad on a rotary polisher. But I also wanted to show this other sanding system that Hercules brought out, and that's their foam-backed discs. So they have this in 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000, and these are meant to be used wet, or the technically correct term is damp. A little bit of water, not a lot of water. And so this kind of mimics the, it actually looks and feels like Mirka Abralon. Let me pull out the 3,000 here. The foam backing isn't as thick as Abralon. In fact, I will get Abralon and show you. Let me walk off camera for 1 second. Oh, I know Yancey always hates when I do this. I need a clean water source. Clean water. Panel prime. There we go. Apologies, I forgot I needed some water for this. Okay, so here's some soapy water, a couple drops of car wash soap. Here is the Mirka Abralon disc. And here is, can you zoom in on that? If I hold it right to my shirt, and you can see the thickness difference. So it's at least half as thick as the Mirka system, but it has the same mesh surface that encapsulates all the abrasives. It's the same style. So this Hercules system is more like Mirka and nothing like 3M Trizac, just if you guys want to know something to compare to. Okay, so that's 1,500. This is 3,000. I'm going to take off my film disc, and actually going from 15 to 3,000 might be kind of a big jump. We'll give it a try. Most guys would probably go to 2,000, but this paint's fairly soft, so my guess is it's going to sand fairly easily. So here's something I want to share with you. Whenever you're sanding down a car, one of the most important things you got to do is, if you're going to do a 2 or 3 or 4-step sanding process, every time you move up in grit, you need to make sure you 100% refine the sanding marks to the next grit level. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to come back and start buffing, and all the refined shallow scratches are going to buff out real fast, and anything deeper is going to remain. And then when you go to look at it after you wipe that section you're buffing off, you're going to see the deeper sanding marks. Then you got 2 choices. One, resand. Now you're wasting time because you didn't do it right the first time. Or push harder with your rotary polisher wool pad, or get in a more aggressive compound. And now you risk heating up the paint and burning it or twisting it. So it takes a lot of practice to become really great at sanding, but that's just one of the tips I would share. Is everywhere you sand, you got to resand and refine from one grit to the next grit to the next grit, so the buff out is fast and easy. Okay, so I am on speed setting 4 on the Bauer polisher. Okay, I just wanted to sand just one section here, because sometimes you can actually see a visual difference. So this area that I sanded is actually becoming darker as I refine the sanding marks. And if I went all the way up to their 4,000, at some point you actually almost start to create gloss. But that's how you can kind of visually tell. And the same thing here. Oops, I did that all wrong. That's supposed to be wet. It did work dry, but they say use it wet. So here's some water, but you can't see that difference. Okay. Okay, so that was roughly 4 section passes. with 3000 damp sanding. Some of you older detailers might remember, but back in 2010, I wrote an article called Damp Sanding. You can, I think, type it into Google, damp sanding, and I think it's, in that time I was using one word, and pull it up, but it has like over 100 pictures, and it shows how to use the old Meguiar's Unigrit system for damp sanding when it was first introduced. Okay, to me, that looks very uniform. And after I hit that again with the 3000 grit, these other defects that were here have actually gone ahead and disappeared. So we're back down to like a flawless finish now. Okay, so next step, one of my favorite tools, wool pad rotary. Every time you go to use this, make sure you got a spur, clean that pad, just in case any kind of particulate or dirt particle or something got on there. You don't want to be grinding that into the paint. I have seen that happen in my life. I've done it in my life. So clean your pads often. I always tell people, if you were to watch me on camera or just watch me personally buffing out a sanding down and then buffing out a car, you would see me clean my pad almost after every section I pass. It's that important. Okay, I got this on the 1 setting, which is like 900 RPM. I'm going to pick up my bead, not throw splatter everywhere. I'm going to spread this out a little bit. Now I'm going to bring this up to the 3 setting. I'm going to push. So now I'm pushing on this to pull out those sanding marks. And here's another little tip. Anytime you're removing any kind of defects with the rotary, if you flip the way you're buffing, you flip it so the pad's swinging different ways. At one point I'm cutting this way, and if I tilt it this way, I'm cutting that way. So you can actually approach the defect from 2 different angles. And to me, that's just a safer way to buff and remove the defects instead of just buffing in one direction the entire time. Okay, and I think I got just a little bit of sanding marks right here and right here, right by the edges. So I'm going to go this way. Okay. Okay, let's wipe off and inspect. And here's another tip. If you're ever doing any custom sanding, you want to make sure you get all the sanding marks out during the first most aggressive step, which is, for me, wool pad on rotary. I know a lot of guys like to try to do this type of work using a orbital, and you can use an orbital to buff out sanding marks, but it'll take you a lot longer, just a whole lot longer. Okay, so let me get this wiped off. All the dust everywhere. Okay, so then, Craig, I want you to zoom down here. I want to show that what holograms are. Okay, so and I can't see what you're seeing, but can you tell me, am I holding this in the way and moving it? Okay, so these wispy lines, these 3D or holographic looking lines, that is what is called holograms. And I actually like to go further. I like to call them hologram scratches because that's technically what they are. They're a scratch in the paint. They're inflicted, in my situation, by the wool pad fibers on a wool pad. But because I'm using what I consider great abrasive technology, the hologram pattern is from the fibers only, not the abrasive. So that means they're very shallow and they'll buff out very quickly. And that's another reason I use wool to pull out sanding marks instead of an orbital, because I always use great abrasive technology so I can get away. I can do the job faster and safer. Okay, so I'm going to go to some 95 here. And at Dr. Beasley's, we sell all these products in pouches because they're earth friendly. They collapse when you put them in a landfill. And but we also sell the squeeze bottles, so you can pour them off yourself. Then don't throw away the squeeze bottles. Okay, so this, of course, is the Beast. Okay, I'm gonna bring up my pressures to finish out. Real light pressure. No black paint. No black paint. That's real important when you're sanding and buffing on someone else's Corvette. If I saw black paint on my buffing pad, for those of you that might not know, that meant I went through the clear coat. And that's a bad thing, not a good thing. Okay, let me inspect my own work before I show you. These lights always blow. Oh, wow, that looks good. These lights always blow everything out. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull the tape line off. Whenever you pull tape off someone else's car, pull it low and slow. Let the adhesive release, because sometimes, and especially with a custom paint job, you will pull the paint off. If there wasn't good surface prep at the body shop, so there's not good adhesion between the primer or the base coat or even the clear coat, when you pull that tape off, you're gonna pull off paint. I've done it, never liked doing it, so taught me how to be careful and share tips with you guys. Okay, now this is where you tell me what you see there, and I need to pull the car, push it backwards, right? Okay. Okay, so here's before with orange peel. Is that light held in the right place for you? Orange peel, dirt and paint, and fish eyes. And then here's the section we just sanded and buffed. Excuse me while I push the car forward. We actually got chunks of wood, wheel chocks, to... What's that look like, Craig?
Bring the light towards you just a little bit. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so there's how you pull swirls out. Now the only thing to do is the rest of the car, but my class is going to do that. I'm going to basically teach them the same kind of thing you saw here, then turn them loose. And then what I normally do is walk around and babysit everybody to make sure they don't sand or buff too long on raised body lines like this or edges like this. So it's always a challenge. And that's why I teach what I call the rule of thumb. Stay about a thumbnail distance away when you're sanding, because you never want to bring a spinning wool pad and have to try to pull sanding marks out that are right on the edge, because that is a recipe for burning through the edge. There we go. Okay, Victor. My review of this, by the way, if anybody's wondering, is I thought the system worked pretty good. One of the nice things about the Harbor Freight standing system is there's a Harbor Freight in dang near every town across America. The Eagle abrasives I buy, the Merca Abralon I buy, I need to go online and order them, have them shipped. And so these are some tools that are right down the road at your store. I do wish, and if Harbor Freight watches this, I do wish they'd bring out a box of sanding discs, like 15 discs, 10 discs, instead of the 5 and 3 that are included in some of these. Like these foam back discs, they come in a package of 3. The film back discs, they came in a package of 5. And in order to completely sand down a car, you'll probably need at least 5 or 6 of the discs and 5 or 6 of these. So just a bigger box would be better. And if you're doing boat detailing, and I teach that I teach machine wet sanding, machine dry sanding boats, you definitely want a bigger pack. So Harbor Freight, bring out the quantity, bulk size.
All right, Mike, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, Victor. And by the way, Yancey is gone this week. He's out in Tennessee working for another client out there.
Yeah, so I'll be the resident voice from the nether, Victor here from Dr. Beasley's. Alrighty, so we got optical clarity detailing in the chat. Hey everyone, glad to be tuned into another awesome show. When removing orange peel or dirt nibs, what's your starting grit? We did have one person chime in on this, James Kramlich. He says, you know, it depends on what you're working on and the level of finish you're trying to achieve, but on a highest end of show car, it'd be painted in a way that would allow the entire car to be block sanded starting with 400 grit. On something with minimal orange peel, you could get away starting with 3000 grit. So that was James's opinion there. What do you
Hey,
have to say,
James
Mike?
is spot on. And the thing about starting out with something as low as 400, which is incredibly low in my world, you have to be in communication with the painter, and the painter needs to know you're going to start block sanding with 400 or 600 grit sandpaper, so he knows to really lay down some paint, some film build. So not only do you have enough to sand all the way through the sanding process, compound and pull out the sanding marks, polish, but still leave enough paint on the car so down the road the owner, say a bird dropping lands right here, they can take that out and not go through the clear. So you got to think ahead like that and put enough paint down. And one of the things I teach in my class is before I do any sanding, bring a stranger's car in for sanding, is I want to get the painter's phone number, call them personally and ask them how much paint they put on the car. Otherwise, I typically won't bring the cars in just because there's no way to know what the top coat thickness will be. The other part, just to add to what James said, is for doing more finishing work like this, not the rough work like starting with 400 and 600 with acrylic blocks. I love this quote by Jason Rose. I share it all the time. He says, top coat hardness is an unknown factor. And what that means is if this paint was super hard, it would take more sanding and probably a lower grit to actually cut it and flatten it. This paint, in my opinion, because I pulled 1500 grit out with NSP 150, is on the medium side. It's not soft, but it's also not hard. So I could get away with a less aggressive disc or even sheet if I was hand sanding and get the same, get great results. So.
All right. We got first from Puerto Rico, our friend Umberto, ready to roll as always. Good to see you, man. Let's see here. Let's see. We got Kyle Naveau in the chat. He's here. Good to see you, Kyle. St. Hilda says, bought my disc. He's in the UK. That's cool to see. Doug, good afternoon, gentlemen. David Boyce, excited to see some orange peel removal. All right, we got Doug again. He's wondering what's the criteria for choosing whether to wet or dry sand? Is it a personal preference thing, or is there a thing that's telling you we need to wet or dry sand?
Part of that's personal preference. You also need to find out if the sanding paper or sanding discs can be used wet or dry. Typically, most people that are going to start out block sanding are going to block sand with a soapy water solution. The soapy water solution does two things. One is it keeps the face of the sandpaper from loading up. Two, it lubricates the surface to make just moving that block back and forth easier, smoother. You know, you need some sort of finesse for that. But and then for machine sanding, you can go wet or dry. I'll give you my personal take. I taught wet sanding by hand and my machine for about 15 years and thought it was the coolest thing. And then when I switched over and started using the dry sanding system by hand and by machine from Eagle Abrasives, fell in love with it. You don't have a slurry running everywhere. When you're hand sanding, you can quickly wipe it and inspect it and gauge your results. Am I done sanding, or do I need to sand some more? Can I move on to a new territory? Anytime you're wet sanding, you got to sit there and dry it, squeegee it off, dry it, blow on it, whatever it takes to get it so it dries so you can gauge the level of orange peel removal. So it's slower and it's messier. But, you know, I don't hold anything against anybody. I always tell people, find your own way to get to shiny. You know, for me, in my classes here for Dr. Beasley's, we teach both wet sanding by machine, dry sanding by machine, dry sanding by hand. We don't teach dry sanding. We don't teach wet sanding by hand anymore.
All right. I got a question here from Rick Smith. He's wondering, Mike, what is a product or tool you wish you had if you were doing this process back when the car was new? So I guess he's asking, if it was 1981, this car just came out, what kind of tools or,
Oh,
products are you wishing that you had back
yeah.
then?
Hey, great question. So, myself and my longtime friend Todd Cooperrider, we're both on the same page. When it comes to factory paint, most of us shouldn't be sanding it because there's not enough film build. There's not enough clear coat, or if it's single stage, there's not enough single stage. There's not enough paint to sand it safely. So you always got to remember, sanding takes off paint, compounding takes off paint, polishing takes off a little paint, and the last thing you want to do when you get to the buffing side is turn your pads over and see the color of the base coat if you're working on base coat clear coat. So here's the only safe way that I could think of to sand down factory paint back in 1981 would be to use something like the Trizac system, maybe even this Hercules system, but working with the really high grits. And then what you're going to do is you're going to level some of the orange peel, not much of it, but you'll really smooth that paint system over. Then you buff it out, it'll look pretty glossy. But I don't recommend to anybody to sand down factory paint. It's just way too thin. And here's the deal. Even if back in 1981, we were to sand this finish down, and 81 would have been the first year for base coat clear coat on Corvettes. It was actually 1980. Even if you were to sand it down and buff it out and not make a mistake, you have now just left that clear layer of paint so thin that it's probably going to suffer clear coat failure. So you're not really doing the owner any big favors. If it's a garage kept show car, that'd be one thing. But if it's a daily driver exposed to the weather, the sun, you're putting the car at risk for clear coat failure. And just to kind of touch on that, I saw some people talking about single stage over on the Facebook group, Detailing for Money. A young man detailed his first single stage car and was asking if this is normal to see the color on the face of the pad. And of course, that is normal. And what I wanted to share was in my second how-to book, How to Detail Cars, my second book published in 2010. I got a picture of myself. I taught a class for the National Corvette Restoration Society in Boston, Massachusetts. And after I did the class, we went out to where the cars were, and I worked on a 1980 Corvette purchased by the original owner, still owned the car, first in base coat clear coat. So it was a dark blue, first year for base coat clear coat on a domestic car in the United States. Europe was a little bit ahead of us, so they probably had clear coats out in the 70s, urethane clear coats. But 80 was the first year for a domestic car. It was the Corvette.
All right. Let's see. What else do we got here? Okay. Lambert's Auto Detail LLC. Had a truck in recently that was repainted and re-cleared over molding on door. Molding was then removed, leaving OEM thin paint behind, or beneath, that is. Can sanding correct or blending the area to make can sanding correct or blend the area to make it less noticeable, or is that body shop work? Thank you for the weekly videos.
I think you could probably blend it. You do want to stick with the higher grits again and just be safe. You're probably not in any danger with the repaint, but where the factory paint is, just sand enough to make any edges go away and to kind of blend it in. By the way, by the time if you put the trim back on, then it should look pretty good. I'd say yes.
All right.
And
Dave,
anybody watching this, I think one of the safest sanding discs out there would be the 3M Trizac system. I mean, you can get the 3,000, 5,000, they go to 8,000. So if it's your first time and you really want to be safe, stick with damp sanding with the Trizac system. Now, you'll probably get sticker shock when you buy the discs because 3M, as everybody says, is very proud of their stuff.
Okay, let's see. We got Dave Myers. Nice job, Mike. Got Robert here. Oh, this is a question I could probably answer, but I'll let you take care of this, Mike. Hi, Mike. What is a good product to use for a light polish?
I would say either the Dr. Beasley's NSP 95, or maybe the 45, depends on the paint, what you're trying to do. NSP 95 is you could think of it as a medium cut polish. Our primers are different than everything on the market because they're completely inorganic. So after use, you can wipe off and go straight to coating without doing a panel wipe. But the abrasive technology itself is very unique. I shared some videos this week and last week where I sanded down and buffed out the plexiglass window on a 1961 Corvette removable hardtop. And in this article that I'm writing actually today and tomorrow finishing it, one of the things I point out is you need to do a test spot when working on plexiglass because it's soft. And the reason why is because if someone's reading my article, but they're not using what I'm showing and they use something else, Something else may remove the sanding marks, but it'll probably leave micro marring behind. So you're not really fixing the problem. And and this holds true for soft paint. So soft paint is really prone to micro marring from poor abrasive technology, just like soft plastics. But the NSP 95 is a good, safe starter point.
All right.
Is that what you would have said? Was that what you said there, Victor?
I think so. Yeah, maybe that or the 45, pretty much the same. I think as long as you know the system, you know what to recommend.
Yeah.
All right. Got BO details here. Hello from Greece. One more excellent class. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Let's see. We got
my friend.
Yeah, cool to see people tuning in from Greece. Love Greek food.
I think he's a gentleman I met over at Automechanica. He's actually, if I remember correctly, he's a police officer, but he wants to be a full-time detailer. And Greece, of course, being an island nation, has its challenges with supply issues.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So he has to work a little harder to get all the cool stuff we show here, but he can do it.
That's dedication. All right, St. Hildis coming in again. Jason Rose shows how much clear is taken off when sanding per stage.
Yeah, he does that on a steel body panel, I believe. This is fiberglass. I have the. Let me walk off camera for 1 second. And that's a good thing to do if you can. Here's the very expensive and the very accurate. This is called a 3% gauge, but this is the Defesco paint thickness gauge. But if I put it down here on this composite body panel, you get 3 dashes because it's not going to measure it. If I had a steel car in here, like I'll have for my class next week in the Model A and the 1941 Graham, then I will show this, but I can't do it on this car. Otherwise I would have. But in the really big picture, it's good to understand maybe what your sanding paper process is removing, the thickness, what the compounding is, the thickness you're taking off, what the polishing, if anything's taken off. That's all good information to know. But at the end of the day, look, you're going to either go out to the garage and sand the car down and buff it out, or you're not. So knowing all that stuff is nice, but I usually don't take any measurements. I first of all, if I'm going to sand down someone's car, and I got a 68 Camaro coming up with a custom paint job, I ask the painter, how much paint did you put on? This guy knows I'm going to sand it, so he is putting extra paint on it. So I don't even need to take any thickness because I'm going to use great sandpaper, great abrasive technology, good technique. It's going to come out flawless with no mistakes as long as he put as much paint on there as he says. So, don't always get wrapped up in the details. I think when people get into the paint thickness gauges, I always teach this is what it's called a go or no go. So either you're going to do it or you're not. A go or no go decision maker for you. If I measure the paint on a factory car and it's 2.1 mils, I know I probably don't want to compound that car. If I measure the paint on a factory finish on a car and it's like 8 mils and it's in bad shape, well, I feel pretty comfortable about compounding that. So it's just kind of a round number. It's just a big picture indicator. When it comes to sanding, Rick, you're either going to do it or not. And if you're going to do it, you should do your research first, like me, and find out how much paint's on the car.
All right. Let's see. We got one of your graduates here, Caribbean Sparkle Detailing.
John.
Yeah. Following up on, I think, your answer to a previous question, he's wondering, would the blend be with a sander or by hand?
The blend?
I think he's referring to the person who was asking about the molding on his door that had been repainted.
If it was me, I would be doing it by machine. Sanding marks, machine sanding marks are always much easier to remove 100% of the defects than hand sanding marks. And that's because typically with hand sanding, you get tracers, which are deeper scratches next to shallow scratches. So you go to buff it out, all looks good. But machine sanding kind of schmoos the whole thing over. In fact, one of the coolest little tools, if you're just doing an isolated area, I don't have it up here, but get the Flex Pixie, the PXE80, get the new 6mm drive unit, get the 3-inch sanding disc from Eagle Abrasives or from Trizac, and just sand those localized areas by machine. And sanding marks will be easy to pull out, and you probably accomplish the goal. Good question.
Yeah. Let's see. Robert, paint is in excellent shape. Thank you, Mike. Got another question from Lambert's Auto Detail. A bit off topic. Are there any talks amongst the pros with wearing respirators during ceramic coating application? I see some do, but there is not much talk regarding the subject.
Yeah, you probably just have to do some research for any specific manufacturer and look if there's a coating manufacturer out there and they recommend you wear some sort of respirator to apply their product, probably ought to take their word on it. When I wrote label copy, at one time my title was corporate writer for Meguiar's. I took over all the writing duties for Barry Meguiar out in Irvine, California. And one of those jobs meant writing the front label copy. So the bold points, remove spots fast, adds a lot of gloss, writing label copy for the front, but also writing the directions for the back. And this is something that I thought was interesting. Anytime we launched a new product, I would have to make an appointment with the head chemist to get the directions. So think about it. The chemist made the product. He knows how it should be applied and removed, and any PPE, personal protection equipment you should be wearing. But that's how Meguiar's got the directions on their labels. If we assume all reputable companies do the same thing, that is, the chemist helps the writer to write the appropriate directions, that means the directions should be accurate. So just check with any manufacturer and say if they recommend using a respirator to use their coating, and if they do, which version, which model, which type of air filter to block out all the VOCs.
All right. Got Rick here kind of clarifying his earlier question. When he was asking about, what would you want to have if you were detailing this car in 1981, he meant more specifically like what's something you wish you had that wasn't available back then that you have today?
Oh, gotcha. Well, back then, I wish we would have had the powerful orbital polishers and such an array of abrasive technology and buffing pads. Back in 81, it was a much smaller offering on the market. So 81, that'd be 2 years after I got out of high school. And there's nothing like we have today, Rick. Nothing. The internet, leveled the playing field. So now instead of trying to compete against Mothers and Meguiar's at AutoZone, you could put up a website or go to Amazon or eBay and sell your stuff to the world without having a brick and mortar storefront. So it leveled that playing field. And it also, because in America, at least in America, and I know other countries too, we have this very strong entrepreneurial spirit, that if you can find a problem and solve it and come out with the product, it's capitalism. You can not only help someone else, but you can make yourself a product and do what you love. So back in 1981, we didn't have the internet, so the offerings back then were kind of limited. But if I had to just pick like a couple of things, one, I'd want the Beast, okay, the gear-driven 8mm, just to make any kind of paint correction faster. And I tell you, I'd like to have the cordless flex rotary. Easily my two favorite tools. That's what I like to have. It would be nice back then to have had 3M Trizac. I'm not sure when the Eagle abrasive sanding discs were invented. I don't remember them from 1981. But without the internet, it can be very hard to find things when you're just in your little home pokey town. So anyway, how you doing, Rick? You took our class where I think you got to sand down and buff out a 1966 Chevy Impala SS. Pretty cool car. Some other dude's muscle car to get to train on.
Awesome. Okay, we got one more from Caribbean Sparkle. Is there an instrument out there that you can use to measure non-metal vehicles?
Yes, there is. They're very expensive. And again, I wouldn't even waste my investment money on buying one of those. Just that's me personally, because here's what I would do instead. I would use great abrasive technology. I'd use the correct pad for the job I'm doing, the correct tool for the job I'm doing, and good technique. And in the 40 years I've been detailing cars, I haven't really had to buy a lot of paint jobs because I went through other people's paint because I didn't have a paint thickness gauge. So common sense, and if in doubt, just tell the customer, just say, hey, this paint, I don't feel good about doing an aggressive compounding step. So I'm just going to polish it. Is that okay? If they say no, let them take it somewhere else. Don't be on the hook for buying someone else a paint job. And the other thing is about the paint thickness gauges. One of the things I always teach in my classes is how to, as I like to say, get in and get out. Get in, do the job, and get done so you can go home. And I see so many people that spend so many hours on a car. And think about it. If you're going to start measuring every panel, okay, so I'm going to take a measurement here, 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 here. And then I either got to buy one of the paint thickness gauges that automatically, electronically through Bluetooth logs that into a file somewhere, or I got to write it down. Now I'm going to do all the other panels. How long are you going to spend doing that? And after you're done, you're still just going to buff it out with whatever your process is. So I just think too many people spend way too much time and thought on the paint thickness gauge when they should just be focused on quality abrasive technology, the right pattern tool for the job, and good technique, and don't do anything stupid. That's just my own take.
All right. Well, that's pretty much it for questions. We're at the 45-minute mark now, so I don't know. You got any upcoming classes you want to plug, Mike?
Yeah, I'll plug a class, but one thing I would like to say is we didn't have Yancey here this week, and so Yancey has a remote camera. So whatever I'm doing, he can walk around and actually capture it. So what we did this week is I wanted you guys to be able to see the horrific orange pill and the after results is we have our tripod up on 5-gallon buckets. We're sitting up really high looking down, and then we position the car so we can roll it back and forth, which takes the place of Yancey walking around the camera. So tell me what you thought of that process that we came up with creatively down in the comments below. And then as far as classes coming up, I've got a 3-day class, which is right around the corner. It's not this weekend, it's the next weekend. I've got 8 cars and a huge center console boat that the class is going to learn to sand. So 100% hands-on. It starts at 7:30 in the morning, goes until all the topics are done for the day. There's only a small lunch break. There's no like 10 o'clock break. If you need a break, go take one. I don't give them. There's no chairs. There's no sitting. There's no PowerPoint. They're 100% hands-on. We cover more topics, more tools, more techniques than any other class on planet Earth. But that's coming up May 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And if you just want to take the 2-day car detailing, you can. If you just want to take the boat detailing on Sunday, you can. You can't just take the Saturday sanding class because I need to know that you know how to do all the other things before sanding that I teach on Friday. So it's a 2-day class minimum. I do have a 1-day class coming up on June 8th. I've already posted pictures of the cars for that class on my own forum, the MikePhillipsForum.com. I got a 52 Hudson Hornet, and I got a 1978 Camaro Z28. Both are black. Both are totally swirled out. I'm going to pick up one more car. So that class will train on 3 cars in 1 day and learn 3 different packages you should be offering your customer if you do this for money. So multiple step, one step ceramics AIO. So, you know, I'm teaching things that apply to you in the real world so you can get in and get out and also match your services to your customer. There's actually a science behind what I teach as far as that goes. And but that's June 8th. That's a Saturday class. It's a 1-day class. It's $500. The 3-day class is $1,795, $1,800. Our business model is basically $600 a day for all the classes we teach. You can get more information on that up at drbeasleys.com. And next week, our topic, I haven't picked a topic yet, Victor, but here's what I will tell you. All these different cars for this class the following weekend will start showing up, like the Model A with the fresh paint job, the 41 Gram, the BMW. So we'll have plenty of different things to choose from to do our live broadcast on.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end. If you want to wrap things up, Mike.
Hey, thanks for watching. And remember to subscribe to our channel, share with your friends, help us to grow the channel. I'd hate to see this go away. So it's kind of a two-way street. We come in, we put the presentation on. We need you to like it and share with your friends. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. That's it,
All right.
Victor.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.